As I mentioned earlier, I like to seal the sign with parafilm. You can also use materials like saran wrap or even strips of plastic bag, but you will have to remember to remove that when it's time for the buds to start to grow, because they cannot penetrate that. The beauty of the parafilm is the buds will pop right through it, and you don't need to do anything with it at all. I like to pre-wrap before I cut. When you pull this parafilm a little bit, it makes it tacky and it sticks to itself. Okay. Now, with both the top wedge and the side wedge, you actually make identical cuts in the rootstock and in the scion. With the scion, I'm going to shape it into a wedge with the front side that will be facing the rootstock being the longer surface and the back part of the wedge much shorter. When we have a wedge, we'll have 4 potential lines of contact between the scion and the rootstock on both sides of the front V and both sides of the back V. But we only need to make contact on one side. And so we really don't need to pay a lot of attention to the back of the scion. If you get a scion and rootstock of similar diameter, you can often match it front and back, and that's much more ideal, but it's not necessary. So you don't need to spend that extra time trying to match. And sometimes you don't have many scions to work with anyway. So I'm going to cut a wedge in the scion, and I'm looking for a couple inch, 2 to 3 inch long section of the scion that has no nodes or blemishes or too much curves in it, where I'm going to cut, because I'm going to want a couple 1 to 2 inch long face on that wedge. When I'm done with that, I'm going to look for a corresponding area on the rootstock that also is a couple inches long and relatively straight with no nodes or branches in the way. I like to cut the scion first, and then I'll know approximately how long I need to make the cut in the rootstock. If the scion ends up being longer than the cut in the rootstock, you can shape and make your face a little shorter. So the first thing I'm going to do is look for my place to make a long straight cut. And again, I'm cutting away. You start at the base of your knife, find your spot where you're going to make your cut, and then don't try to force it perpendicular to the stem. Put it at an angle more like an X and drag your knife blade through. There's less resistance. You do not want to go more than approximately 1/3 of the way through the center of the scion. Okay, and as a reminder, the flat side of the blade goes down and touches the scion. You can do it in more than one cut. You can start shallow if you need to. And turn it over, maybe go about halfway up, and cut the back of your wedge. So this is the cut surface, the front of the scion. It's at least 1 inch long. And here's the shorter cut on the back, and here's the side view. You can see the very thin bark layer here. That cambium layer that it needs to match up between the scion and the rootstock is only, as I mentioned, only 1 to 2 cells wide. So how are you going to do that? In general, when you're grafting material of this size, the thickness of the bark is similar on both the scion and the rootstock. So if you line up everything on the outside when you join them together, then everything will be lined up accordingly towards the center, and the cambiums will be in close enough proximity to join successfully. So now that I have the scion already pre-cut, I look for a place to graft. And I look for a straight area on the rootstock. You can see a couple inches here, really straight, no curves, no blemishes. The nodes are a really handy place to start your cut, because when you remove this leaf, it actually results in a slight shelf there, which gives you a good starting place to make your cut into the rootstock. When cutting into the rootstock, you have to be careful not to cut too shallow, because you may end up just coming back out and just removing a big sliver of the bark and a little bit of wood. You don't want to cut too far across the center, because if you go to the center, you start to go around the curb, and the line is no longer straight. It's a curved line. So we're going to start in the shelf, and we're going to go down. You can use your sign to measure how far you need to go. You can place it right there. You ultimately want to end up approximately a third of the way towards the center. Don't be afraid to remove leaves that are in your way. So just like when you're cutting the scions, start at the base of your blade. Get it into that little shelf right there and set it in a little, and then you can try to guide it. Push, rock the knife back and forth is a good way to go controlled. Slowly increasing the length as you go. Slowly rocking your knife, holding it on both the handle and out here with your other finger for control. When you get down, you can remove your knife and remeasure to see if you're about at the right length of cut. Open up the cut, slide your scion in, and put it down slowly so you don't tear the cut. And then try to line up. So again, on this V, it's where this longer line meets the rootstock. This is the seam that we're looking at, that we're trying to have straight and tight with no waves, bows, and on a really good one you can let go and it actually will close up and hold it in, but that doesn't always happen, and that's where the tape comes in. Okay. So now I'm going to tie the graft off with the plant ribbon. So I start my tape at the bottom, a little below the base of that cut, wrap it around once to get it secured to itself, and then wrap it up, overlapping as you go. And this gives you an opportunity to cinch it together and to readjust that sign. You're looking at that seam the whole time. And you tie it off. One last thing I like to do is add a little bit of the parafilm right here in this juncture to prevent rain and irrigation water from going down in there. So now once you've completed this part of it, it'll take about 3 to 4 weeks until the buds have started to swell and start to grow. During that time, you want to keep it protected. You don't want to put it out in the wind and the sun. So a shady location, keep it watered, and then approximately 3 to 4 weeks later, you'll start to see hopefully some buds swelling and starting to poke through the parafilm. Now, one potential downside of the side graft is because the top is still here, the top still has the apical dominance for the tree, and in some cases these buds may not actually flush out and would eventually just fall off. So we need to remove the apical dominance and stimulate these buds. There's a couple ways you can do that. But at some point you're going to have to make a commitment whether you think this is going to go or not. So you can either prune it back at about 3 or 4 weeks, anywhere from this range, or sometimes you might want to just take a chance, especially if you see the bud going, and cut it back here all the way. Personally, I like to remove it in steps if I'm going to do that. Another option is to actually bend the top over to a more horizontal position. This will also remove the dominating factors of the top of the seedling, but you still retain the leaves for a little longer period. So you're still feeding the plant as optimally as you can, or the plant is feeding itself, I should say. So anyway, that's the main thing you're going to need to do 3 or 4 weeks out. If it's not already swelling, you need to try to induce it either by pruning the top or bending it over. Eventually, you will need to remove what's remaining by a final pruning cut, maybe after 1 flush of the top, and then the plant is good to go. A couple things you need to also be aware of are the nodes on the leaves down below. Eventually, we're going to want to remove this as well. In these nodes, axils or buds that may or may not try to grow. From this point on, when you've got a successful graft, you never ever want to let anything emerge from the stem or from the root system, because it'll be the rootstock, not the desirable cultivar that you grafted on the top. Here we have a graft approximately 3 weeks old, and you can see the terminal buds up here just beginning to poke through the parafilm. So this is the first sign of a successful graft, what we're all looking for. And here you can see one a little bit more advanced coming through. This also illustrates how I mentioned lopping over the seedling to get the benefits of the leaves, but to remove that apical dominance. I would still leave this on for a few more weeks at least. So this one is off well and growing, so I'm going to illustrate removing the top. And again, here you see where I lopped it over previously. Now we have the grafted avocado tree, and down below I'm going to retain the leaves for a while, but this is a good time. There are some little branches down here that we might as well take out now. And if there's any buds starting to grow, you just rub them out now with your finger, and there you have it. So there's your grafted Charwell avocado tree, and I would keep it in the nursery for another month or 2 before planting it.